Mike, over the last week or so, there's been a lot of talk about Cole Perfetti's ice time. Had not been seeing the ice at the end of third periods or in overtime in, a couple close games. Scott Arniel, after a strong game last week, said as much afterwards. He's got to find a way to get those guys out on the ice more, and has done that. Obviously, the switch through. And listen, to me, I thought it was way too early to be talking about this, especially when the team had been winning. If anything, give the coaches a nod for doing what it takes to win the game and move forward. But listen, you'll always, especially for younger players like that need to be impactful, you wonder why this was happening. I'll say this. Cole Perfetti over the last couple of games, especially last night, is certainly doing his part to make sure that he's top of mind for the coach. That might have been his best game of the year last night, and he's had a few really good ones. It had been the Lowry line that had been carrying the team for the last little bit. Last night, it was he, Perfetti, Nikolaj Ehlers, and Vlad Nemetsnikov.
Yeah.
So what do you make of Perfetti's situation and how he's been responding on the ice with his play?
Well, I think his play is doing the talking and very much sending the message to his coaches and management that he's ready for more. And, Cole Perfetti, like last 4 games, he's got 4 assists, all of them primary, none of them of the cheapo variety.
No.
Like he is making some sensational passes, like racking up a bit of a personal highlight reel here lately with just his vision. And I think that's something we've known about Cole Perfetti. There's never been a question about his smarts, his hockey IQ, or the way he sees the game. But it's one thing to have that at, a junior level or even at the AHL level, another to be able to process that at NHL speed. And I think we're starting to see, Cole Perfetti's brain, his very big brain catch up to the NHL game in a significant way. And the results are certainly encouraging. And Cole Perfetti, I mean, the way he's playing, you simply can't keep him on the bench. They should be looking at ways to actually get him. And I think they are looking at ways. The fact that he was moved onto the top power play unit is a good sign that they see that he's doing some things that they want to try and tap into and take advantage of. So, yeah, I mean, Cole Perfetti, if he continues this kind of progression, the kind of player that he was at the start of the year, the kind of player he is now 9 games in, and the kind of player he might be a few weeks, a few months from now, it's certainly encouraging to kind of view what that might be, because he certainly looks to have taken a big step here.
Well, and listen, I mean, and another topic that, we should mention when we're talking about that line is Nikolaj Ehlers. And listen, Ehlers is his biggest critic, and usually is, and we heard that last night. But it's sort of been a very uneven start for Ehlers. He missed training camp. First few games were a little bit of a write-off, to be honest. I thought he was excellent in Detroit, scored that big goal. Did not have a good game in Montreal on Saturday night, and then came back with a good performance. What do you make of Nick right now, how he's clicking or sometimes not with Nemetsnikov and Perfetti, although I think it's looked really good as of late, and the need for him to be able to bring that, but on a more consistent level for the club?
Yeah, and I mean, Nikolaj Ehlers, as you say, he can be a streaky player, and he can be a player whose confidence maybe goes up and down a little bit. And when he gets down on himself, sometimes that translates into his play on the ice. I think the missing all of camp, and that obviously it can't help but take a toll on you. Like, you're now trying to get up to speed with players that are a few weeks ahead of you in the sense that they've been playing some meaningful minutes and you haven't. But last night, and so 2 of the last 3 games for sure, there's something to build on there. And I think we're seeing with Cole Perfetti and Vlad Nemetsnikov, who may not ultimately be long for that line, because it'll be interesting to see what happens, for example, when Gabe Vilardi comes back here, and if that's in a couple weeks, what's the trickle down? I think, and you mentioned the Lowry line, like, are you taking Nino Niederreiter off that line? I don't think so at this point. I mean, things can change, of course, and maybe the way they're playing now isn't the case in a couple weeks, but it looks like they found something really encouraging with that third line. So, where does Gabe Vilardi go? How does that all factor in? Does he go back with Connor and Scheifele, and then does Iafallo move down, and does Perfetti move back to center where Nemestikov currently is? Like, there's a lot of moving parts here, and it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. And I guess they'll cross that bridge when they get there. But I think, Ehlers, he's a guy who can be a game breaker, a game changer. And we're seeing, some flashes of that for sure. The key now is to make it, more the norm rather than the exception. And I think as he gets more games under his belt, and for Nikolaj Ehlers, because it's so important, as he gets a little more confidence, a little more swagger into his game, that's probably a really good thing. And it seems like that pairing with Cole Perfetti, the way they went in on that 2-on-1 and the goal yesterday, the wraparound goal, like that was a confident play, right, by a confident player. And so that was a great sign, and the Jets will certainly want more of those signs in the coming games.
Mike, when are we going to see Gus on Perfetti's line? Every time he's out there, he scores in about 5 seconds.
Yeah, Cole Perfetti is his personal setup man, right? Because that's primary assists on David Gustafsson's 2 goals. And he went, 4 years, Huss, between scoring in the NHL. Now he went 6 days between scoring in the NHL. And it's funny because, of course, Cole Perfetti and Gustafsson are not on the same line, but that's twice now in kind of a blended line change. And the pass that Perfetti made last week on Gustafsson's goal was just incredible. And his one last night was pretty good as well. So, they do seem to have some chemistry. So does the Gus bus, get promoted at some point here? Or maybe they just try and find ways to have those two intersect a little more on the ice. But, yeah, that's been a great development as well. I mean, and don't forget, Huss, David Gustafsson's only in the lineup because Gabe Vilardi got hurt. Like, he was a healthy scratch to start the year. Talk about a guy who's, and he did it in training camp as well. He had a really good camp, and he came in knowing that nothing was going to be gifted to him. Just to simply crack the 23-man roster was going to be a battle. And to his credit, and there was a lot of competition for that 13th forward spot, he earned it. He's now moved out of the 13th forward spot because of injury, and he's making a case to certainly remain in this lineup, if and when they get back to full health.
Mike, you came in just after we had Brad Lambert on, and pretty exciting start for the Moose these young players. I mean, and I sort of referenced, Mark Chipman's interview with Darren Drager, and obviously there were much bigger things that they were talking about at that point. But what he was talking about, the direction of the organization, and mentioned the level of excitement in turning 6 players pro right now, and seeing the contributions from these young guys right now with the Manitoba Moose. I know you in particular pay close attention to the Moose, always have. Who knows when we'll see some of these players, get an opportunity up here, but early results, very, very good, starting with Big Bad Brad.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a 19-year-old who's, making the transition at the pro level to playing center, something he's done in junior, but that's not easy to do. And I don't care if you're talking the NHL or the AHL, the second best pro league in the world, and he's doing it as a top line center, which means he's regularly out there against the other team's best at that level. And he's 19, like he's going against seasoned guys in a lot of cases and absolutely tearing it up. And, right behind him is Nikita Chibrikov as well, who a lot of questions about, okay, how's this guy going to transition to the North American game? Well, it's early, but he certainly seems to not be having any difficulties. And yeah, you go up and down that Moose roster, there's a lot to get excited about, no question. And the future does appear to be extremely bright. And I would put Brad Lambert at the top of that list, at least playing pro. That's not even touching on a guy like Rucker McGroarty, who, oh, by the way, is leading the NCAA in scoring right now. The Jets have Colby Barlow's tearing up the OHL again. Thomas Milic just recorded his first pro shutout in the ECHL. Like there's a lot to be excited about in terms of what's in the pipeline with the Winnipeg Jets. And as you pointed out, Mark Chipman certainly noted that in his chats last week.
Well, and you add in McGroarty and you add in Barlow, and Elias Salmonson, who looks so good so far. I mean, like just stepping away from the minutia of the upcoming road trip and where the team is at right now. I mean, doing a big picture conversation about the Winnipeg Jets and what this team looks like on the ice in, say, 2 years from right now. I mean, there's a ton of possibilities, and certainly the fact that they have so many of those top young prospects that are coming into their own, it does get people talking about what Kevin Cheveldayoff may or may not be willing to part with if they tried to make a move to maybe shore up the blue line, which I think we'd all agree is the one area where the Winnipeg Jets could really help to, it would help them to strengthen up.
Well, and we haven't even touched upon another reason, and he's still a very young player and very likely a huge part of the future in Ville Heinola, who, was really the story out of training camp. And if not for that horribly timed injury, I suspect we might be talking about how great Ville has looked in the first 9 games with the Jets, because I suspect that he would be playing a lot. And, the hope, of course, is that once he recovers from his injury, that he can quickly get back up to speed and make his presence felt in this lineup. So you're right. The Jets have, they have a very deep roster right now at the NHL level, but it's not like the cupboards are bare on the farm. In fact, they're potentially overflowing here once a few of these prospects get a little more seasoning. And the other thing is the Jets can afford in some cases to maybe let some of the fruit ripen on the vine a little longer than, they don't have to rush guys. So you're talking about a Brad Lambert, they don't have to rush him into the NHL right now just because he's playing really well at the AHL level, because they have some depth up front. And well, it may be frustrating a little bit for the player and maybe fans who want to, they want everything to happen quickly and kind of in the here and now. I think history shows that sometimes letting good prospects marinate a little longer ultimately actually benefits those prospects and the organization in the end.
Well, and listen, while you bring up Ville, and we all know the really unfortunate injury that kept him out of the lineup and, will be for the foreseeable future, probably into around Christmas. I do wonder about Declan Chisholm right now. He's not gotten into a game yet. I mean, the one time Nate Schmidt got sent to the press box, Logan Stanley came in, and that was quickly reversed. And Schmidt, to his credit, has played better since being back in the lineup. When do we see Declan Chisholm? What's it going to take for him to get in the lineup? And I guess part of that, Mike, is if he's in this situation for the next couple months, what happens when Ville returns? Because certainly I think he'll get back to the point where they're looking to get him in the lineup probably ahead of Declan.
For sure. And, we were just, Kenny Wiebe and I were talking last night about that very thing. And I wondered, at some point, are we going to see, and I haven't looked into the exact details under the CBA of how it works, if I believe the player might have to agree to it.
Oh, but I do wonder if stint.
Right. And because I don't know that it's doing Declan Chisholm a whole lot of good to just be sitting. And sure, you're getting the value of practice and, a lot of extra skating because he's out there every morning skating with the healthy scratches. So he's getting a lot of, his conditioning wouldn't necessarily be an issue. Although it's one thing, players talk about this all the time. There's kind of practice conditioning and then there's game conditioning. And he's just not playing any games anywhere right now. And so for a young guy who, of course, took such a huge step last year, what you don't want to happen, Huss, is to basically have a lost season. Now, nobody would ever wish for injury. But, you look at the Jets and what they have with the 8 defensemen. The fact that Logan Stanley was the first guy, when they made that 1-game switch, that kind of told you right there that Declan Chisholm might be the 8th guy right now, aka the second man up, not the first man up. So barring, a couple of unfortunate injuries on the blue line, and sure, those happen in the course of a year, but I don't know that you want to just sit a player indefinitely, a young player that is. And that's why a guy like Kyle Capobianco was so good in that role last year. A little more mileage under his belt. You're not worried about the development curve or anything like that with a Capobianco the way you maybe are with a Declan Chisholm. The Jets ultimately chose to waive Capobianco and keep Chisholm, likely because of a waiver claim fear. And look at what's happened. Kyle Capobianco is lighting it up with the Moose. And, rather than sit in the press box, now Declan Chisholm is kind of in the Capobianco role, and Capobianco is in last year's Declan Chisholm role. A bit of a Freaky Friday reversal there.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Declan's liking the paycheck, but
sure,
he is probably getting a little bit antsy to get back into the lineup, and we'll see whether that does happen at some point soon.